This video is on interpersonal communication, which is kind of reviewing chapter 6 of your report writing workbook. The first thing is defining interpersonal communication, which is talking between one person and another. It can be in all different settings. And the book talks about that the transactional approach is the best, something we do with others rather than simply to others. In other words, we're a part of the conversation. And this is really important to remember when dealing with your clients or your suspects or your inmates, whichever field you go into in criminal justice. We have a tendency to talk to them rather than engaging with them as they are part of the conversation. One thing that influences how we talk and how we behave is our beliefs, values, and attitudes. And beliefs really are those things that we believe in and how we look at the world. So a lot of these ideas come from how we're raised, what we see, our experiences within the world, and that kind of forms our belief system. And values really are based off of the beliefs and is really how we behave in the world. It really is our standards. So if your belief system is based on one of the things I'll use with me, my belief system is based on honesty. I was raised that not only with my family, but in my church. It was expected at school that you be honest. And so it's become part of the way that I behave in the world. And so it is a standard that I hold in high esteem. And so, uh, for example, attitudes are not as strong as values, but they do affect how we behave and they are easier to change. But going with my honesty, um, I have a great belief system and my attitude is that in my career that I should strive for honesty, even if it's something negative that's going to happen with my client. And this really was important for me, but also it really reflected well in working in criminal justice because my clients then were able to trust that what I said was true. So if they asked me to do something and I knew I wasn't going to do it, I wouldn't blow it off and say, well, maybe later, or I can't right now, get back to me. I'd just say, no, I can't do that for you. And they might not be happy with my no, but they knew I was being honest with them in comparison to other counselors that knew that the answer was no, but then would play games and hem and haw because they didn't want to deal directly. So I highly suggest being honest with your clients. But it's really important to recognize your own perceptions and your own belief system, values, and attitudes, and how they are shaped by your past experiences. And one of the things is your perceptions can be wrong or inaccurate. For example, um, most of us probably haven't experienced too many different cultures. Many people in Michigan grow up in rural areas, and that's kind of the culture they adopt. So let's just take my experience when I was prior to working on my doctorate. I worked for an agency, Valle de Sol, which means Valley of the Sun. It was a methadone clinic, and my job was taking care of. Um, I was a contracted service taking care of drug addicted newborns and their mothers to make sure the babies didn't die and that the mothers got off whatever they were addicted to prior to birth. And so I was working with a lot of people who were Hispanic, mostly Mexican descent. And I didn't know anything about Mexican culture. And uh, but luckily for me, I did not have any preconceived notions about um, what Mexicans were like. Today, based on the political rhetoric, people might think that Mexicans are drug dealers, um, that they are criminals, that they wear sombreros, maybe they ride burros. I don't know what they think. But that's kind of the political rhetoric that's very negative and creates a negative attitude for people that don't know. But because I was lucky, I didn't have that. And I had wonderful experiences. In fact, when I moved to Arizona, it was the first time I had ever had Mexican food, like tacos and burritos. And I was very lucky that I worked with a partner who was a naturalized American, meaning that her family moved here when she was third grade, and she went through the process to become an American. But she was bilingual, and she taught me so much about Mexican culture and things to do and not to do. And so, in other words, your perceptions can be wrong or inaccurate. And in this field, particularly, you have to recognize the culture and the background of who you're working with. And then you must think very carefully before you speak. Think about, is it a middle class thing that you're expecting a lower class person to know about and act in the way that you're expecting them to? You have to be confident in yourself, and you have to present your ideas neutrally. And ultimately, the big thing is understanding who you're talking to, their background. And so, one of the hardest things to do is what is referred to as active listening. 40% of our day is listening. I would think it's probably even higher than that. The thing that we really like to do, all of us, is we like to talk more than we like to listen. Some people like to talk more. Maybe that's why I became a teacher. Uh, one of the misconceptions, though, is that listening doesn't require effort. And just think about when you're in a classroom and the teacher has a very monotone voice and talks really slow. How long does it take before you're distracted? So ultimately, listening requires an awful lot of effort, particularly if there are external distractions that really take away from you listening. So, one of the things that we need to do in active listening is try to eliminate those external distractions, like, let's say, noise, phones. Your cell phone has become an external distraction. It becomes the go-to thing you do when you're not listening or you become a little bored. I do it myself. I'm at night when I'm watching TV. A lot of times I'm not even watching the TV, I'm listening to it, and then I'm just aimlessly looking at apps like Facebook or um, some of the other apps that are out there. And I'm not paying attention to anything. I'm not giving my undivided attention. Um, One of the big things that we have to do is not to prejudge the speaker. Think about if you have a client that comes in and is dirty, um, might be unkempt, hairs, kind of long, they look scruffy. And you immediately assume that maybe they have mental health problems. Don't prejudge. Maybe they're homeless, and that's going to be part of your job to try and find them a decent place to live. Remain patient. And this is one of all of our biggest problems is because we have been taught to have instant gratification. So if you're um, listening to somebody, let's say a teacher or a guest speaker, and uh, they're not getting to where you want to be, or their ideas immediately don't seem the same as you, you're you're going to be thinking not of what they're saying, but what you're going to say to counter what they're saying. So remain patient, listen to what they have to say, and try not to plan your response. um, and this is the big thing: we speak at a rate of 125 to 200 words a minute. The problem is that we comprehend 400 to 600 words per minute. So becoming bored with a speaker or becoming impatient is very normal. So some tips for paying attention: eliminate those distractions. Put your phone away. If there is glare from a light coming in, like the sunlight coming in, close the blind. If there's noises, try to eliminate the noises. So, for example, I remember I took a class, it was a summer class on terrorism, and they were mowing the lawn outside the window. And the professor, for the first half of the class, never got up and shut the windows. I realized it was summer, but we couldn't hear what he was saying because the mower would pass, and he'd just keep on talking. And finally, somebody, not me, I should have, but um, one of the students said, Dr. Hagen, can we move either to another class or shut the windows? Because I can't pay attention. And so think about the noises that are going on. Another thing for paying attention, make frequent eye contact with the speaker. That doesn't mean that just stare at them, but show that you're interested. Then if you're speaking one-on-one, make small comments to show that you are listening, like they say something interesting, or go ahead, explain to me what happened, please continue, so that it shows that you are actually listening. Think about what speaking means, what you're learning, and is this person informed? And if you're in a setting like a classroom setting or you're at training, take notes. You don't have to take a lot of notes, um, but highlight what they're saying so that then you can look back at your notes and get a full picture of what the points were that were being spoken. Here's a thing that you can do to try and help um, you pay attention is note the emotions of the speaker. Are they using sarcasm? Are they angry? Are they excited about their topic? Are what they're talking about? Are they sad? It's funny. I notice in class when there's a few examples that I sometimes use that really, to me, are very emotional and um, to the point that I get kind of teary eyed. And I notice that when I start talking about these, that the students then start responding uh, by paying attention more. So watch their emotions. Remain neutral. And this is one of the things that's hard. When people talk, a lot of times what they say you might disagree with or agree with. Try to remain neutral. And sometimes this is very hard, particularly today with the political rhetoric that goes on and people not wanting to listen on a non emotional level. And sometimes it's very hard when people are trying to force you to believe in what they say, um, or they know that you disagree with what they say, and all of a sudden, instead of it being a topic of discussion, it becomes you're my enemy. So, really remaining neutral is very important, and particularly in today's world. Observe nonverbal clues you can of your speaker, their voice, Where are they looking? Their body language is so important. Do they seem confident? Do they seem afraid? You'll use this a lot with your clients, you know, as they're looking at you and they're saying, no, I didn't, but their body language is screaming, yes, I did. Yes, I did. Um, and there's some books out there that talk about body language. So in your spare time, I highly suggest getting one of the books and reading about it. And one of the other things to show that you're paying attention, you can ask open-ended questions rather than a question where you're going to get a yes or no answer. So, how do we become a better listener? Nichols was called the father of listening, and he came up with this list of 10 things, and these are also in your book. First of all, in what they're speaking, find an area that you have an interest in. Judge the content, not the delivery. Not everybody is good at speaking and delivering a message that inspires people, but the content might inspire you. So listen to what they're saying. Don't become upset or jump to conclusions. Listen completely to what they're saying. Try to focus on what their central theme is. Take notes so that you have something to reference with. Show effort to listen. You know, what are their facial expressions? What are your facial expressions? Eye contact. What is your posture? What is their posture? Think about if somebody slumped back in their chair as I'm teaching a class. What's that telling me? Are they listening or aren't they? I I have had in Bishop Hall where I teach, they have these podiums. And one time I had a student who because I'm short, I can't see over the podium, was asleep. But he wasn't just asleep in his chair. He had pulled another chair up so he had a chair for his feet, and then he was slumped in the chair and had his head on the table, but I couldn't see him. And was he paying attention? Obviously not. But several of the students were very upset about it. I don't know, one, if it was because I didn't notice it, or two, that they're trying to pay attention and he's asleep in the front of the class. Um, Ultimately, fight your physical distractions. For example, there are times when you might be falling asleep or starting to nod off. One of the things you could do is excuse yourself and go stand in the back of the class. Sometimes I even have to do this because I get cramps in my legs, um, but it helps me then pay attention. So try and fight off those physical distractions. Work on listening to different types of messages. Think about technical, where somebody's giving you specific ways of doing something, orders that you're given, directions. Um, Understand what your psychological blocks are. Note what issues you get emotional about and you turn people off to. Even think about like um, politically, you know, what messages. I mean, I know I do when certain people have messages. I'll give you an example. So COVID-19 um, created the stay-at-home order. And I had somebody that was on my Facebook that all they complained about was that they couldn't get their motorcycle out of storage. This was at the same time that um, we had snow on the ground 2 or 3 days a week. So, was it really that important? And so, the psychological block that started happening with me is he he kept complaining about all these ridiculous things that weren't really that important, that ultimately I stopped even reading his posts. I just psychologically blocked him off. Use excess comprehension time, and that's meaning because remember, we comprehend faster, to reflect on information And even you might want to note some of your own thoughts of this. Going the wrong way. The other part of listening is then responding. And you want to provide good feedback by being specific rather than general about any agreements or disagreements in what they say. So, you don't start out, well, you said this. You want to be specific. I really liked your talk, but had some concerns about this one specific thing, and this is why. So, attempt to have a logical reaction, even though that you might disagree rather than an emotional one. See, instead of I have some concerns is a lot different. I think that's stupid. So even how you word it in a neutral way ultimately is the correct way to communicate. Be tactful by trying to say something positive rather than negative. Um, a 3-to-1 rule is what I call it. If you have something negative, think of 3 positive things to say. And actually, they use this in Michigan Department of Corrections. Be assertive, honest, and direct, and recognize your own body language and your own emotions. Are you coming across like you're aggressive? And then ultimately, when you're working with somebody that maybe in the work setting that you disagree with or there is a problem, you want to identify the problem, being specific, stick to the issue, don't make it bloom. Then be objective when stating the problem. And then, how did this problem develop? Then you and the person or persons can brainstorm for possible solutions. Then think about or evaluate those solutions against what your objectives or goals are. So if you're in the workplace setting and maybe it has something to do with a client, what are the goals of the your position? And then once you choose a solution, you want to revisit it to see if it's working. In other words, this is really kind of the basis of how we do science and assessment. Go back and see if what your solution is that you chosen, is it accomplishing what you want it to do? Um, in the master's program I had, one of the things we talk about is program evaluation. And one of the students had spoken to somebody who had created a drug court, and they had asked him, has it been evaluated? And the judge responded, no, I'm waiting 5 years, so I have enough people to evaluate it. And going back to 4, the student then said, so he's waiting 5 years to find out that he did something that could have been easily corrected the first year. And that's why you keep revisiting what your solution is. So if it isn't working out, you can change it. And so ultimately, effective communication starts with you and having confidence in how you communicate. And that's the end.